everybody. That was like a new walk-on music. That's a long way for us to go. My name's Anna Palmer. I'm the CEO and one of the founders of Punchbowl News, joined on stage by Jake Sherman, another founder of Punchbowl News. Welcome to Cocktails and Conversations, the Quantum Revolution. We are thrilled to be hosting this conversation, and we are going to be inviting Senator Young, the Republican from Indiana, to the stage shortly. We were supposed to have Mr. Ro Khanna join us as well, but unfortunately, the House is in the middle of a long series, Jake.
The House never cooperates with anyone's schedules, as I could attest after 15 years of doing this.
So hopefully he will come at some point, but we are going to continue this conversation right now. After our conversation with the senator, we're going to be joined on stage by IBM's Senior Vice President and Director of Research, Gil Dario, for a fireside chat. We want to encourage everybody in person who's here to stick around afterwards. We have cocktails, we've got food. You can meet some new folks and talk more about quantum. Also, just want to remind everybody that you can sign up for Punchbowl News at punchbowl.news, and we are on all social media platforms at Punchbowl News. We encourage everyone to share this on social media. With that, let's welcome the senator to the stage. Senator Young.
That's a long walk up. Thanks, Senator. Okay, so we're going to start with a few news of the day questions just to set the stage and to make this as newsy as humanly possible. And the NDAA, the annual Pentagon policy bill, passed the House last week. I think it's very clear that it has no chance of passing the Senate in its current form. How confident are you that an NDAA will get signed into law this year?
Put me into very confident category. This is a priority for, is that on?
I don't think it is on.
1 second. Technical.
You have a booming voice, though, so it carries throughout.
We want to make sure that everybody on the
Anna, why don't you give him your mic for a second?
Yeah, so the question was about NDAA. I'm very confident, Jake. I mean, there aren't a lot of things around here that year after year after year I can express a lot of confidence that we'll be able to get done. But folks at home want us to make sure that our war fighters have everything they need to avoid a war, and if necessary to win one. We need to take care of them. It's a dangerous time. We'll work through some rough patches, and there were some rough patches, absolutely, in the House, but you heard it here first. Probably actually heard it elsewhere, because this is pretty bipartisan. We'll get it done.
And you are a graduate of the Naval Academy. You are somebody who's involved in military policy and have been for a while, since I knew you in the House. Your colleague Tommy Tuberville is holding up a bunch of military flag officers over the Pentagon's abortion policy. Where do you come down on that, and how does that blockade end?
Yeah, so listen, I'm highly sympathetic with what Tommy's trying to accomplish here. He wants to protect what's been known as the Hyde Rule, making sure that no taxpayer money goes in any way towards abortion. The president has had to adapt to a post-Roe environment, and he's made some decisions that offend the sensibilities of those of us who consider ourselves pro-life and who represent millions of people who do the same. So, that's created to put it charitably, that's created tensions and conflicts and differences in perspective. But with that said, there's a national security imperative we're dealing with here, and to the extent we can make sure that Senator Tuberville and those who share his view get a vote on the floor of the Senate, I think we'll resolve this thing. And so I don't think that's an unreasonable request.
All right, we're going to get to quantum very shortly, but before we do, we are obviously in Washington, D.C. We are quickly heading into the 24 cycle. You were chairman of the NRSC. Talk to us about the Senate map in 2024, the House map. What are the chances for Republicans to take the majority?
We've got some really good pickup opportunities. I mean, you've got some talented colleagues of mine on the Democratic side who are in states that are red states. John Tester, Joe Manchin come to mind as guys that, if you just look at the numbers and you consider the fact that it's a presidential year, these guys should lose. but they're talented enough and savvy enough that they could find a way yet again to pull a rabbit out of the hat, and so it'll be interesting to watch that unfold. Beyond that, I think our current chairman of the NRSC, Rounds, has done a great job of sort of trying to figure out how we can navigate some of the primary challenges we've experienced in recent years, and so I predict we win the Senate, and if for nothing else, it gives conservatives something to focus on because many conservatives back home aren't confident that we're going to win the presidential election.
So let's move on to quantum and to your work. You've been very involved in a lot of, let's call it tech policy over the last couple of years. You were instrumental in the CHIPS Act. It was actually your bill first, you and Chuck Schumer. I remember trailing you around the Capitol for longer than you would have liked back in, I guess that was 2021. It all blends together. So let's define quantum for those in the audience who aren't as familiar.
Yeah, so quantum physics is it's an area of physics that, unlike normal physics, right? Classically, when you think of studying light, you study a flow of photons. But today, through quantum physics, you're studying things at the atomic or the subatomic level. So you're looking at individual photons. And what you need to know about quantum physics is when you start studying the behavior of subatomic particles that behave in really interesting ways, and it actually allows you to capture a lot more information or to communicate a lot more information at the subatomic level than it does at sort of higher level ups. And what that means for all of us is if you can communicate more information over a smaller area, then you can process things at a much faster speed, allowing you to solve harder problems, to come up with more amazing capabilities, whether it's science or national security or coming with breakthrough drugs. So it's important that the United States leads the way in this area.
I'm so glad that you gave that definition and you didn't ask me that question, Jake. We have a bunch of people in the back. If you guys want to come in and fill in some spots, we, just want to welcome you to. You don't have to sit in the back if there's some in the front.
We won't be offended.
Please find a seat. You can break in there. All right. So you said it's important that the U.S. has a role here to play when it comes to quantum technology, building quantum machines. How important is it for the U.S. to be a leader? How do you see the U.S. versus other countries, and maybe some collaboration that we're starting to see as well?
Yeah, it's essential that we lead the way, and I know this because really smart people have told me that it's important that we lead the way, and it's pretty easy to see how it has like national security implications or implications for our way of life moving forward. We know that modern cryptography, to use an example, is essential to keeping our government secrets, to keep secret so much of our financial information. So if somebody comes up with a way to break our codes, that should frighten us. Well, in this really discrete area, if, say, the Chinese, for example, who are making some amazing advancements with respect to quantum, if they were to come up with a way to break our codes in the financial space, that would leave a lot of Americans vulnerable to all sorts of meddling, maybe theft of their personal property. In the national security space, if the Chinese could crack our codes, they'd know where our nuclear missile submarines are and could prevent them from launching. That, in turn, could completely negate our strategic deterrence in preventing a nuclear war. So those two examples alone ought to scare the heck out of policymakers and sort of call us to very concerted action as it relates to quantum.
On this policy, sometimes on these kinds of policies, as Anna and I have covered for a million years, we oftentimes find that Congress is so far behind the eight ball, right? Meaning like the expertise on these very complicated topics on the staff level, even on the member level, I'd say you're an outlier here in understanding this at a higher level. But
I'm a political science major, right? I mean, so that's
yeah, but you read. We don't have to get into the intellect of some members of Congress. But but seriously, is there the expertise in our government? And I think this is something that Anna and I hear all the time. Whether it's AI, whether it's quantum, whether it's cybersecurity, does this expertise exist at a level that can keep us competitive? or make sure that we're the leaders.
Yeah, listen, I think about all of my colleagues, including some of those that you were just referencing, right?
Let's not name names.
We would all agree. We would all agree that we got to figure out ways to bring in more talented people, more dynamic people into government, and let them leave and come back if they like. So our current recruiting practices into government, our retention strategies, our reimbursement policies, all those things need to change. The private market understands that the war to win a product category or to gain dominance in a particular sector is about talent. That's what it really comes down to. These days, government's like that too. So to the extent we can get the best minds on the beat to figure out how to adapt our current legal environment to an AI-permeated world, we need to do that. And then we can't do that once. You need to cycle people in and out of government over a period of time so that we remain relevant to solving problems like quantum. For those of you who thought I was getting my technologies mixed up, I brought it all home at the end, didn't I?
Look at that, with a bow. This is great. I want to ask you, you recently co-hosted a business roundtable of deans of leading business schools about chips and quantum with Representative Khanna. What was your biggest takeaway from the meeting, either in terms of what they are asking from you or what they're starting to see in terms of the education?
You know, we covered a lot of ground. Roe and I thought that it was important in the wake of chips and science, which is sometimes a misunderstood piece of legislation. I mean, there was a national security imperative driving this. There was a focus on the importance of manufacturing. You know, the old adage that many people embraced in the 1990s is that we could produce potato chips, computer chips, same thing, right? So we're starting to rethink a lot of our basic economic premises. What are they teaching in our business schools? Are they teaching this, or are they teaching a stale, sort of outdated economic model? So we talked some about that. We talked about the interest of their graduates of going into some of these areas like chip manufacture and manufacturing more generally, because it's important to our national security. But you do find a lot of business school graduates still gravitating towards consulting and financial services. So we talked very globally about the need to stay in touch on these issues. So to the extent we're missing something at the governmental level, which we are apt to do, we want them and their scholars to reach out to us on a regular basis. And then it goes the other way. Like if we need to change how we structure loans to go to business school and dedicate them towards particular purposes, you know, I mean, that's something we should know rather than wait a decade until we've fallen behind in an area.
But that's a really interesting point you're making. I mean, how financial services, consulting, those kinds of jobs are natural steps out of business school. How do you get people interested in quantum and AI and things of that nature when you have these other options that are just so natural?
The answer is yes. You can get your best business school graduates interested in these areas. Manufacturing quantum components, manufacturing AI software, and being somehow involved in that space. Those are really exciting and cutting edge, and we actually are finding some business school graduates. But can you get somebody to acquire an old manufacturing plant in Indiana, repurpose it, make it more productive, and sort of bring it into the 21st century? We need to be good at that as well, because the extent you can manufacture there, that impacts your ability to train a workforce to manufacture their higher end stuff. So we talked a little around that issue, but it's something we're going to explore more as we stay in touch with these guys.
Jake mentioned kind of at the top the Endless Frontiers Act and the work that you did in a bipartisan fashion to get chips passed. Talk about the impact. We're talking about backstage, just in terms of even your home state, what you're seeing, and kind of that next phase, right? So it's one thing to pass something, it's another thing to then get to that implementation phase.
Yeah, so, in this town, and I think naturally, that the drama circles around passing a bill. That's what most of us follow. Yeah, I know. I tried to say that commendably. It's natural you cover the drama. But though it's not as dramatic, it's arguably more important. Like, how do you actually implement the bill once it's passed? as I indicated backstage, we can all have a business plan, but to actually be able to implement that plan and outflank the competitor is the really elegant thing and the difficult thing. So that involves painstaking oversight from members of Congress, and we're in that phase right now. And my hope, as we pass Chips and Science into law, was that the state of Indiana would be benefiting from this, or similarly situated states that have done everything they can with the assets they have, but we haven't seen our incomes go up as much. We've seen the out-migration of much of our population, including people with more of an education. So you got all these metrics that we're trying to improve. Can we reverse some of those, or at least improve them? And we're starting to see some green shoots emerge. So we've made things. In fact, we're the most manufacturing-intensive state in the country in Indiana, and have been for a long time. But now we've demonstrated the ability to make computer chips. We have a consortium of universities focused on making quantum adjacent technologies. So the industries of the future are coming to the industrial Midwest, and it's not sleepy. I think a lot of your prime business school graduates and many others who may not even choose to go to college will be working in these industries in coming years.
And you just have to hope that the government, in implementing it, keeps its interest, right? I mean, that's the big challenge, is that administrations change, Congresses change, and you have to make sure that you follow through on these things politically, right?
You do. It helps when you look at the defense space. We know there's going to be an ongoing interest, not only because of the defense, the importance of defense, but because there is an industrial base in almost every congressional district across the country. Well, the research piece of Chips and Science doesn't get a lot of attention, but it was $200 billion in authorization. The actual chips part was only $52 billion. The research stuff's important in its own right. I mean, the benefit cost ratio of federal research is off the charts positive, so we need to invest in more. But beyond that, we have seeded research dollars in land-grant universities and other state universities around the country, so there will be, I hope, be an ongoing interest in making sure that Chips and Science is attended to in coming years.
One of the exciting things about quantum is the kind of the emerging technologies, as you said, right? Just in terms of how fast it can move, in terms of some of the different industries, whether it's defense, whether it's a lot of other spaces. When it comes to this, project 5 years from now, like what role should Congress be having? Is it are there bills that need to be passed? Is it more funding? Is it just staying out of the way with regulation?
Just to clarify, was that for AI or?
Well, we can take AI and then quantum. I mean, I think quantum is the real question too. I think let's start with AI though.
So on AI, we're in the midst of a pretty exciting effort. It's Mike Rounds, Chuck Schumer, myself, Martin Heinrich, and our teams. We've been visiting with hundreds of technologists and thought leaders and business leaders and venture capitalists and national security leaders about their concerns and their interests, upside interest in the development of artificial intelligence. And one of the things we've discovered, yes, there's some amazing, like scary risks about the ability of bad actors, for example, to be able to produce super toxins. That we need to figure out our way to manage those risks. But the upside potential to come up with novel drugs in short order to solve all kinds of problems and come up with new consumer products and ensure that every child in the world conceivably can have a personal tutor and on and on and on is breathtaking in scope and really exciting. So a light touch regulatory initiative would ask each of the committees of jurisdiction in the Senate, hopefully the House ultimately, to say, all right, we're probably not going to ban a lot of things that aren't currently illegal. We need to figure out how we can adapt our laws, maybe come up with new regulations to adjust to this AI permeated world. And so much of it will involve personnel changes in government. There's some things that are, I think, fairly obvious to me and others that we're going to have to address. One would be bias in algorithms. We already have laws about biases against, racial and ethnic minorities, religious individuals, et cetera. Well, those will still be law, but what does it mean when an algorithm biases things? It'll still be illegal, so what sort of regulations are needed to address it? Transparency. We got smart people working on this one. How do you, while protecting trade secrets of whomever developed an artificial intelligence program, still make sure there's enough visibility into it so that no one's engaged in nefarious behavior? Liability. Who's liable for all sorts of things that could go awry through using AI? I think there'll be answers, creative answers to some of these problems, but within the next 6 months, I believe we'll greenlight this legislative effort, and you'll see a work product coming out of the U.S. Senate. That's certainly my hope.
And talk about quantum, like project 5 years as to what we will see in the quantum space and what Congress needs to do to facilitate that.
Yeah, so we have a national quantum initiative. Many of you I know have heard of it. Some of you are perhaps leaders with respect to this initiative. This was established formally in a bipartisan way through Senators Thune and Nelson just several years ago. And that piece of legislation that created this initiative needs to be reauthorized. Institutionally, it established a new office within the White House at the Office of Science and Technology Policy, working with National Science Foundation, DOE, and NIST. And really what we need to do is just figure out how we can harness the power of quantum technology, which I covered at the very highest levels earlier. Not a lot of follow-up questions there, please. And we need to support, what the experts tell us are the real possibilities to develop new products that will benefit humanity and keep us all safe and secure. We need to invest in new infrastructure down to the state and local level. In the state of Indiana, we're already thinking of this. Up in Chicago, which is not in Indiana, but it's real close.
Thanks for the clarification.
Yeah. He was like, I saw Jake. No, it was probably off camera. No. So you have a quantum exchange up there, and we'd like to connect the quantum exchange to Gary, Indiana, over to Notre Dame and Notre Dame, Indiana, down to West Lafayette, Purdue, and over to The Ohio State University, right? And so that's real exciting and give a lot of our scholars and researchers an opportunity to make novel findings and figure out how to harness this stuff. We've got Indiana University, Purdue University, Notre Dame, figuring out how to harness this technology and make new products. And that's just Indiana. Tennessee's doing some interesting things, but most importantly, the Chinese are also doing interesting things. Their satellites are using quantum to communicate with one another. And so we need to work internally also with our partners and allies like the Dutch, who are also doing some amazing work of their own.
All right. Senator Young, thank you so much. Unfortunately, we're out of time.
Thanks for having me on.
It was great.
Thank you, Senator Young.
All right. Now I'd like to welcome Dario Gill, Senior Vice President and Director of Research at IBM, to the stage. Sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. As the senator leaves, I was very impressed by the explanation of quantum, but you're the researcher and the scientist. An A+?
Absolutely. No, it was.
And you just, yeah.
I don't know. Is this working?
It is working.
Yeah. Okay.
And if it isn't, you're a scientist. You could figure it out.
Look, I think as the senator alluded, one of the most interesting aspects of quantum technologies is that it's recasting how we understand the nature of information. And if you look at the world of computing, I think we would be hard pressed to overstate how important computing has been over the last 70, 80 years in our world. And the moment we find ourselves with quantum computing is that we are revisiting the most fundamental aspects of the nature of information. So the last 70 years has been a story about the digital world, right? The world of bits and zeros and ones, and we have democratized access to information tremendously and the access to computing power that we have. And in this moment, now we are reformulating what is possible to do with information, and quantum computers are a break with the past, and it's going to allow us to represent information more richly and solve problems we couldn't solve before.
So let's let me just interject for 1 second, Anna. Give us an example in the next 5 years, what kind of advancements we're going to see in quantum, and how, for somebody, like, localize it for us, not to DC, but localize it for like a general audience. What do you think we will be able to do as a human race that we're not able to do now, and what is the most exciting thing that we could look forward to?
So look, one category that is incredibly exciting is having to do with doing discoveries and understanding the physical world. So what do I mean by that? So if you look at in the world of energy storage, for example, so how do you develop better battery technology, better lithium chemistries, and so on? If you are in the industrial process business, how do you develop a better catalyst that facilitates the process of manufacturing? If you are in the aerospace, right? If you're Boeing, right? How do you develop a better alloy that you can use in the manufacturing of airplanes? If you're in agriculture, how do you develop a better fertilizer, right? That increases the productivity of crops. So what is common in all of these spaces is that we're dealing with performing discoveries of the physical stuff, the world of atoms, right? And the world of biology. And the challenge we have had historically is that how do we perform new discoveries of the physical world is trial and error from experimentation. This goes back a long, long time. We used to name eras of civilization after materials, right? The Bronze Age and Iron Age and so on, Oil Age. So we will continue doing that. With the advent of computers, we have spent decades modeling this physical system to help us accelerate how we can discover new properties. But it turns out that we weren't terrific at doing that. And the reason for that is because the properties of the physical world are quantum mechanical. We know quantum physics describes with enormous accuracy that physical world. And these new technology, these new machines are very well suited to model quantum mechanics because they're designed to implement them natively. So that is the promise. The promise is the ability to perform discoveries faster in a whole range of physical properties of the world that our very existence is going to depend on. We're also going to apply them in the world of mathematics for all sorts of other applications that have nothing to do with the natural world. But I would say that that's an example that is very concrete that is going to make a huge difference to our society.
I want to ask about, we heard the senator talk a little bit about the U.S. leading on this, but then also the concerns, right? It's not just the U.S. who's trying to figure out quantum. You have China, you have bad actors. How important is it from your purview that the U.S. actually is the leader? And I know you have been doing some work with Japan and some other countries. There are some alignments. What's happening?
Well, I think it's incredibly important. So look, if you look at from the perspective of what are the technologies that are going to have make the biggest difference for economic and national security objectives, I think a reasonable list within computing, you would say semiconductors, AI, quantum. I think in the world of biology, biotech will be enormously important, and of course energy and all the energy-related technologies. So within that short list, quantum is an incredibly important set of technologies that there's sort of three set, I think, of policy objectives that are key. One of them is the sort of the offense side, is what do we have to do to invest on the human capital, on the R&D aspect, and national level projects that can ensure U.S. leadership on this space. I think the second element of it then has to deal with sort of like what are the risks associated with that we have to deal with. So for example, the cryptography example that Senator Young alluded to is incredibly important that we migrate the cryptographic protocols of the world to ensure the security of communications. And then the third element of it is sort of like the rules of the game internationally. What is the export control regime? Who are natural allies and partners that we can invest together? So getting all those three elements right, I think, is the core of the policy.
And we asked you this question probably a couple of years ago when we were talking about chips, and I think this is a question that informs a lot. But if you could snap your fingers and have Congress do something, what would that be? And I mean, that's a big question on quantum, on any issue, quite frankly. But what are the kinds of things, besides building these international kind of alliances, so to speak, what do you think those things are?
I would highlight two things on quantum very specifically.
Yep.
One of them is, as the senator alluded, reauthorizing the National Quantum Initiative and increasing its support. I think what that will do is the basic research side of the equation, the support of faculty, the support of researchers in national laboratories, and sort of like that core foundation of it. But I also think that that's not enough. I think the maturity of the technology is getting to the point where we need to do is also a national level objective. And a good example of that would be the creation and launching an ambitious effort of creating a quantum-centric supercomputer. If you look at, in the past, the Department of Energy, as an example, has had many flagship programs for creating high-performance supercomputers. We use them to safeguard the nuclear stockpile of the United States, as an example, through NNSA in the Department of Energy. And it has been a foundational capability to enable a lot of incredible science. We've used it for meteorological predictions, you name it. Well, now it's the moment to actually embark on the next generation of supercomputers. And I think that that's a national level program where it's going to require the best of the national labs, the best of universities, and the best of private sector coming together to do that. So that will be the dual objective. That will be, let's create a capability that the nation doesn't have through a very focused effort that is in the grand tradition of creating sort of like the best computing systems in the world.
When we spoke last time, we talked a lot about education, right? And that as really being a cornerstone when it comes to some of these future technologies, certainly chips, certainly quantum. You're very involved in that. What needs to be done? Is there more money that needs to be done when it comes to making sure that there is the workforce that could be working on the next supercomputer?
Well, definitely. I think we face a lot of significant challenges in educating the domestic workforce in STEM areas. So we have, and I'm an example of, as an immigrant myself, of attracting the best talent around the world and making sure that we continue to attract that. So that's incredibly important. But, on the domestic talent side, we don't have a workforce that represents the diversity of the nation. So there's huge gaps on the participation of like Hispanic population and African American population and Native American population in STEM fields, particularly in advanced degrees. And there's a lot more that we should do on that front. And frankly speaking, there's a lot of things. I serve on the National Science Board, and there's a lot of gaps in terms of competitive pay, even for graduate students, and how we support the stipends of graduate researchers. So there's a lot of investment and upgrades that we got to do to ensure that we're going to fulfill the demand that we're going to see from a workforce perspective on these areas. So I'd say that that's an area where we have very significant risks.
You're almost out of time, but I want to kind of end where we did with the senator, which is talking about the next 5 years when it comes to building a quantum supercomputer, when it comes to the issue of quantum. What are some of the things that are on the horizon? I know sustainability is a big issue. Tease that out a little bit for us.
So I think, on the positive side, on the quantum, there's enormous excitement in the community. The rate of progress is undeniable, right? We, at present operate over 25 quantum computers, right? To give you a sense, there's been trillions of programs that have been run on these quantum computers, over 2,000 scientific publications using these systems. So we're entering now an era where the utilization of these systems for utility, for value creation in science and business is entering into reality. Just to give you a sense of the energy and enthusiasm that's going on, we run a summer internship program in IBM Research, and for about 100 slots, we got 20,000 applications. What? So
Did you run the Punch Bowl News internship also? We don't.
I think we're
one.
busy enough.
we don't have one, but that would be a good pool to choose from.
So it's just like a tremendous amount of interest. So I think to answer your question, it's about channeling that energy towards ambitious goals. And that's why I think we're seeing curriculums being developed in universities and lots of opportunities on research. But the idea of creating national level projects, whether it's quantum supercomputers, quantum satellites, and you name it, it's about sort of matching that intensity and that excitement and that energy against goals that can only be achieved through the mobilization of federal, state resources and the private sector working together. So it's about having better dreams about this technology and making them a reality.
All right, we are going to leave it there. Dario, thank you so much this evening.
Thank
We
you.
really appreciate it. A big thank you to IBM for partnering with us on this event, making it possible, and to Senator Young and his team for joining us. Please stick around for some cocktails, conversation. We'll have more talk on quantum. Have a great night and stay safe.
Thank you.